If you're considering a move from Toronto to Victoria, well, you're not alone. In fact, every year more than 20,000 Canadians migrate from Ontario to British Columbia. And so in this video, I'm going to zoom in on the Greater Toronto Area and Victoria, and I'm going to highlight the key differences. So if you do decide to move, you know what to expect and you can be better prepared. If you're new to the channel, I'm Sean P, and I'm a real estate expert who lives and helps people buy and sell in Victoria, BC. On this channel, I post videos every single week to help you stay informed. So if you always want to know what's going on and the best strategies you should use, you should like and subscribe so you don't miss anything that we have coming up. As well, if you have plans involving real estate, I'd love to be part of them. That's actually why we do all this. So you can use the link in the description to get in touch with me and put some time in my schedule. I'd love to see how I can help. Now, let's zoom in on Toronto and Victoria, and let's explore what you should expect if you're making the move. Before I jump into the content in this video, one thing that I think is important, I just kind of get out of the way to get things started, is I actually made this move myself. I lived in Toronto for 25 years. I actively traded real estate in Toronto for about 16 years, a huge team, top 1% on the real estate board. So I know Toronto really, really well. And I think the reason that I ended up being attracted to moving out west is probably going to ring true with a lot of people who have made the move, because I love the city of Toronto, but I didn't feel like I was as connected to it as I had been for years leading up to my move. And I also just felt like my values were going in a different direction. And I think that's a big part of why people leave. Toronto is a very career-oriented city. It tends to have a lot of focus surrounding opportunity and money and economics. I mean, it's a massive financial center hub, and there's so many opportunities, and the ability to influence Canada on a whole is strongest from Toronto. It's an amazingly powerful place to be. And at the same time, I had young kids, and my lifestyle was a lot more geared towards exploring outside and spending time with them than it was trying to get closer to the city or to, build and network and influence things. So I ended up really falling in love with the idea of having a slightly slower pace of life, a safer place to raise my kids, and just generally having a bit of a smaller community. I wanted to be somewhere that I could really integrate and feel like I was part of something where it's really easy to just kind of lose yourself in the shuffle of Toronto. And I think this is a big part of the motivation for most people. People, when they move out to Victoria, it doesn't tend to be motivated by opportunity or money. People don't move out here for a job. I say this all the time. People move out here and then find a job. They move here not because it's going to open some new opportunity for them. They move here because they think they'll live a better life on the West Coast. And you only live once, and it doesn't really matter. The job part, the money part, that'll work itself out. But being in a place where you thrive is the most important part. That was my story. And in helping people out here, it tends to all center around that. So with the motivation piece out of the way, what I do want to dig in on is some key things that really stand out as differentiators between Toronto and Victoria. We're going to look at things like traffic, opportunity and jobs. We're going to look at the housing markets. We're going to look at things like personal safety and, recreation. And I'm going to get right into it without any further delay. So let's start with the real estate market. Comparing the real estate markets between Victoria and Toronto, there's a couple things that really stick out pretty quickly. The first one being that both markets on paper look very similar. Both Toronto and Victoria have an average single family home price of right around 1.3 million. The key piece of context I think is important to bear in mind, though, is that the Toronto Real Estate Board reports on an area more than 10 times the size of Victoria's population. And they didn't fit all those people in the same area as Victoria. So Toronto's market has sprawled outwards. When we look at an average price of 1.3 million, it's important to remember that that's made up of single family detached homes all over that trading area. So some of them will be $600,000 or $700,000 or 3 or 4 in some areas. And then there'll be other ones that are in, prime downtown core, and those might be $2.5 to $4 million for an average home. Victoria doesn't sprawl to the same extent. We've got a market area you can cross easily in your car in about 35, 40 minutes. And so the reality is that we don't have the same range of price for an average family home. It tends to be pretty tight around that core price, that average price. Obviously, if you're looking at the West Shore or up the peninsula, there are some discounts. You'll get more house for your dollar, and you'll start to see detached properties showing up around the mid eights, mid nines. But realistically speaking, you can't get started quite as low as you can in the outskirts of the GTA. Now, another thing to bear in mind is that our housing stock is different as well. In the core of the GTA, especially in Toronto, there's a lot of very small, semi-detached and detached properties. It's not uncommon to be on a 20-foot frontage or even less sometimes. In Victoria, we don't have much of this. 40 or 50-foot frontages are kind of what we'd see as the low end. We also have larger square footages. We have very few semi-detached properties. Out here, we call them half duplexes. Don't ask me why. But we do have a healthy number of townhomes. The condo markets are also different, but comparable. You can still get in around the same number. We tend to see things start around 400, which I'd say would be pretty typical for Toronto as well. What we do find, though, is that our market in Victoria didn't have the construction boom that Toronto had. So we do have newer condo buildings, but they're in better balance with older buildings. So if you're shopping for a condo, chances are you're going to be looking at buildings from a variety of vintages, especially if you're looking outside of the core. A lot of the stock is going to be stuff that was built in the 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s. We didn't really have a construction boom in the 2010s. So we've got some buildings from that stage, but not a tremendous amount. Next up, cost of living. I'm just going to start by saying if you search online, cost of living comparison Toronto and Victoria, you're going to find numbers all over the map. It's really sketchy, in fact. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to compare some of the main things that would be a consideration for people, and I'll let you draw your own conclusions. First of all, I already covered our ownership housing market. There's a lot of good comparison. Generally speaking, if you live in a desirable part of the Toronto core, you can own a home in a desirable part of the Victoria core. And depending on how things shake out, you might end up with a little bit less or a little bit more space. Now, when it comes to things like gas and groceries and your monthly expenses, it's going to really depend. Victoria's grocery prices are not that far from Toronto's grocery prices, although in general, most people think that we pay a little bit of a premium, and this just makes sense because we have to bring everything over to the island. Gas is definitely more expensive. Expect to pay anywhere from 30 to 60 cents more per liter for gas in Victoria. Childcare is actually going to likely be edged to Toronto, where they're paying a little bit more in prime locations. But again, there's going to be a huge variability because childcare will be a lot more affordable if you're further from the downtown core, just because rents won't be as crazy. The interesting thing is that in general, Victoria is probably going to be more expensive. And it's not going to be easy to measure because it's all those little nickel-dimey things. Restaurants are expensive here. Food's going to be a little more expensive. Gas is going to be a little bit more expensive. But one area that Toronto would win is on rent. They have so many condos available for rent right now that prices have gone down significantly. As well, their housing market took a battering. So it's probably more of a moment in time right now than a long-term thing. Generally speaking, if you're looking at prime downtown Toronto, you'll probably pay more long-term once their real estate market gets back up and kicking. The other thing that's an advantage in Toronto is that you're going to have a wider variety of options when it comes to things like groceries, and that can make a big difference. We just don't have the same volume out here. And so there's not as many things to pick and choose from. I'm going to say that this is pretty close to balance, with a slight edge in Toronto's favor being a little bit more affordable. Up next, the weather. Now, this is one that will go well for Victoria. We are known as the best weather in Canada. We are the most temperate climate in Canada. And generally, if you're moving from Toronto, I'd say that the thing to expect is that you can say goodbye to the big swings that Toronto has. Toronto has colder winters and hotter summers than Victoria. The winters have a lot of snow and they also have really humid summers. Victoria is just more consistent throughout the year. It does get hotter in the summer. We'll be in the mid 20s through most of the summer, typically with a cool breeze because we're sitting right on the Pacific. We've just got this huge amount of, thermal energy that we're surrounded by. And then we'll also have pretty consistently mild winters. Our winters tend to be between +5 and +15 degrees. We will usually get about a week or two of snow somewhere in the middle. It'll drop down for a couple weeks. We'll get some snow, which is actually really nice. But it's not like Toronto where we get these huge dumps. And frankly, I like that. I enjoy winter, but the reality is that in Toronto, a lot of the time it just melts and turns into sludge. Whereas living in Victoria, when the snow's here, everyone gets out and enjoys it, and then it's just kind of done with. We do get rain here. That's something that people will always talk about. But the reality is, people often think of the numbers from Vancouver. In Vancouver, they get about 180 days of rain a year. It's every second day that you can expect to get rained on, where we get about 50% less in Victoria. So we get significantly less than Vancouver. And if you see rain on a daily forecast, that doesn't mean that it's all day. We'll have in our peak of our rainy season, maybe, a couple weeks or a month where it's pretty consistent that we were experiencing rain. But the majority of the time, if you see rain on the forecast, it's an hour or two here or there, and often it happens overnight. So in this category, I have to give the edge to Victoria. We are known as the best weather in Canada, and there's a reason for it. Commuting and traffic. Oh my God, do we ever win this one, guys? Okay, Toronto has gotten really bad for traffic. And I say that as someone who lived there for 25 years and actively traded throughout the GTA for a decade and a half. The traffic has gotten crazy. And this is one area that if you do decide to move to Victoria, you will be so happy. Now, you will hear people in Victoria saying that they have bad traffic. And that's typically going to be people on the West Shore who commute downtown as 9-to-5ers. If you're on the West Shore and you're going downtown, there's really only one way to do it, and it's a 2 to 3 lane highway. It gets backed up. Here's the thing. It's not real traffic. It's not the same as what you'd experience in Toronto or Vancouver at all. It is a backup of 20 minutes and then you're right on your way. It's not the unpredictable trapped experience that you can have, or needing to cross town on the 401 and 16 lanes of traffic are at an absolute stop. So in Victoria, even at rush hour, you can get anywhere you want to be in usually between 40 and 50 minutes, and that's including traffic. If you're headed somewhere and there's no traffic, even if you're crossing to the very far end of the West Shore from downtown, you're probably going to be there in about 35 minutes. It's a small market area. And the best part is, you don't even need to own a car in a lot of instances, because if you're commuting and you don't live too far from downtown, you can just ride your bike. And that's a year-round possibility because of our weather. Crime and personal safety. Okay, the first thing I'm going to say is that both cities are home to a lot of people. And so crime exists in both cities. And that's just something, if you want to live in a large urban area, like, you can't avoid that. What I will say, though, is my experience was that the type of crime that you hear about happening in Victoria is different from the type of crime that you hear about happening in the GTA. Part of it is that there is just more people, but also in the GTA over the past decade or so, crime has gotten to be a little bit more organized, and some of the stuff that you hear about going down is at a much higher level than what we see here. Most of the stuff that we see in Victoria is petty crime. It's low-level stuff. Like any city, we have a homeless population, and a lot of the time it's people who are in a difficult position just trying to figure out how to get some cash. So we see, car theft, burglary, little things like that being the majority of what goes down. Obviously, we get a little bit of everything under the sun, but it's not to the same scale, and it doesn't typically have any relationship to gangs. We're just not a thoroughfare for that kind of thing. Now, in Victoria, we do have a homeless population and a good deal of people who are on the street struggling with addictions. So the other thing that I'll say is, while I haven't been in a position where, while I'm out and about, I have felt uncomfortable or like I was in danger, you still need to be smart. And no matter what, if you're going to live in a large urban center, you need to have a certain level of street smarts. Big part of that is just knowing where not to go, especially after dark. And in Victoria, the majority of our homeless population is centered in one area, so it's pretty easy to keep tabs on. In general, I'm going to say Victoria has the edge as being a safer place for day-to-day life than Toronto, especially if you are not going downtown and avoiding places that would obviously put you in danger. Values and lifestyle. Toronto is a global city, and there is incredible opportunity in Toronto. I mean, the sky is your limit. If you can imagine it, you could make it happen in Toronto. And so what I find is that the values and the lifestyle of people who are living in Toronto tend to be centered around economics, career development, and generally people are there because they're fighting to hustle and they want to achieve as much as they possibly can in the professional aspect of their lives. Victoria has a very different mindset. It tends to be a slower pace of life. The values tend to be more around health, personal betterment, and access to the outdoors. And just generally speaking, people who live here tend to be more chilled out and friendly. It's a very nice environment to be in. But at the same time, I think if someone is coming from Toronto and they're that hustler type, they'll probably have a hard time adjusting. Even myself, I moved out here because I wanted to have that pace of life in with my kids and my family. But getting out here, it took a little bit of an adjustment. So if you're moving out here and you're trying to figure out if it's right for you, really, it's going to depend mostly on you. Be serious with yourself. If you're coming out here to save money, you're probably going to be disappointed. In fact, a lot of the time, I find that things feel more expensive, and I have a hard time grasping if that was something that took place just because of inflation or because it's just a bit more expensive living here. People often cite the cost of living here as one of their main challenges when they look back on their move. If you are someone who is in it for your career and you have the ability to work remotely and you just think that you'd enjoy working here more, then go for it. But the reality is it's not really a place that people move to build a career. We don't have a lot of company headquarters. It's a smaller population. Just generally speaking, there's less opportunity in Victoria than there is in Toronto. If you're moving here because of your family and you want to have a more wholesome experience for your kids, you want to feel more connected to your community, I think you'll really find that here. I know that I did, and it's something that I've met a lot of people who move from larger cities. You feel like you're more connected to the city on a whole because I could be across town and I'll bump into someone I know. It's just a smaller place, and it feels nice to have that kind of connectivity. Finally, if you're downsizing or retiring, this is an amazing place to be. You will really enjoy the kind of environment that you're in. You have access to all kinds of outdoor amenities, and the city is just big enough. We still have great restaurants, we still have great entertainment, not to the same extent that you'll find in Toronto, but when you balance everything out, it works out really well. So there you have it. I'd love to hear what you're curious about that I missed, and if you can drop questions in the comments, I'll do my best to get back to all of you as quick as I can. As well, as always, these are, generalities of what you can expect, but if you want to tailor your plans so that when you do move out here, you can focus in on the aspects that are the most important to you, maybe it's, being close to the pulse of the city, or maybe it's getting more space. Well, I'd love to help. And that's a big part of what I do, is helping people pre-navigate their move. You can use the link in the description to book some time with me and we can hop on a call. I'd love to learn about what you're trying to do. As always, I'm so grateful that you took the time to watch. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe so you don't miss my next video, and we'll catch you when it comes out. Thanks again. We'll see you soon.